Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do, to give men a platform to speak man to man, heart to heart, mind to mind, and journey to journey, and that journey into the heart. This rock formation behind me is Catajuda in Central Australia, which is a sacred masculine site, very close to Uluru, which is the sacred feminine site. So it's through these energies that are here with us today and are guiding our men into the heart. So today's guest, all the way from Miami Beach, Florida, it's my great pleasure to welcome Robert Althuis. Hello, Robert Althuis. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Gemma, how you doing? Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
So, Robert, I like to start with giving people an insight into how you would describe the man you are today, and then we'll jump back and see how you got here.
All right. The man I am today, right? That's a challenging question to start off with. I think as a man that's dedicated to living as close to truth as he can. And how did I get there? I had a beautiful journey. I was born in Holland. I told you I lived in Australia for a year. I was 21. I left Holland. I went to Australia for a year and traveled around the world a little bit as a tennis pro. And then I ended up in real estate in Atlanta, Georgia. And I ended up going to night school. And, the US was, it worked really well for me. I was a very competitive guy and I found myself having lots of success and kind of chasing this American dream and got all caught up in that.
Robert, can I ask you? So we will go into this story now. So in your college years, what hopes, dreams, aspirations did Robert Althuis have then?
Well, it depends on which college years, right? So I got out of high school in Holland and I went to the University of Amsterdam, like my parents expected, especially my father. He was an executive, that's what you did as the son of an executive. You go to a good uni, as you call it, right? And it wasn't my thing. First of all, I wanted to be a tennis pro. That was really my dream. But he thought that's not a career, you got to go to school. And I really wanted to be an architect. That's kind of like, I was very creative and I loved development. And he said, well, architects don't make any money. Why don't you just learn how to develop and, make some money? And, he was kind of hardcore that way, right? And it wasn't my thing. So I went 3 years for university in Amsterdam. So, late 80s, early 90s, you can imagine a young guy, not interested in college in Amsterdam. You do the math. I did end up with 2 associate's degree, and then I kind of cut the cord, and I literally went as far as I could, which was Australia. And I was trying to get away from. I didn't want to be a university. I didn't want to, I felt this presence of my father, and I was like, fuck it. I want to go travel. I'm going to go away, and I'm going to go find myself. Yeah. And that was kind of the first step on that journey. Now, later, I went back to night school because in my mid-20s, I got into real estate and I figured out I'm not going to get very far without a degree. And, my father had cut me off. He said, you're on your own. You thought you were a big boy. Go manage, right? Actually, he cut me off when I went to Australia, which was the best thing he could have ever done. And so I put myself through night school and now I was working full time and I was good at it. I was motivated and it was a way to prove myself and this competitive drive came out and, in the US that's really amplified because this is kind of like the most glorious things you can do. Right. And so I really went on that journey in a big way. I ended up going to Ivy League Business School. I ended up at GE. At the time was still one of the most prominent companies in the US and made it to the top 1% of that. And then I went out on my own and, was successful in that way, making more and more money and becoming ever more a narcissistic asshole in the making, right? And, like so many men in that kind of life, I got lost in it. I got lost in that just, gaining the power, the influence, the money, and the world rewards you for it because, they think you're successful. And so everybody is like patting you on the back and they say you're such a successful guy and your career is so good and you're making so much money. You got the cars and the toys and the beautiful women and you got all the, you got the life, right? Mm-hmm. So the world in a way is like encouraging you and saying, this is the right way. Yeah. But I was bankrupting my soul in the process because I swam with the sharks, the big sharks, and I became a big shark. And that's not me. And I was good at it. I was savvy. I was intelligent. I was smart. I used a lot of my intuitive capacities in not such great ways, which I know quite a few men that have done that have a lot of empathetic capabilities. But, in the business world, you can use that in two ways, right? So I was very successful materially, but just hollowing out myself internally, right? And ignoring it and suppressing it. And eventually I sold most of my business in 2015 and, I reached that proverbial mountain peak and this was supposed to be like the celebration. I made it. I was in my early 40s. I was set, I had made it, I reached the summit. And I remember flying back, my business at the time, most of my business was in Latin America, flying back from my headquarters in Bogota to Miami. And I remember sitting there, with my expensive wine in first class. And I'm like, man, why am I not happy? Yeah. Why do I feel so lost? Why do I have everything? Like now I have no excuses anymore, right? Because all those years I could say, well, the next 100,000, the next million, the next house, the next car, the next toy, the next whatever, the next promotion, the next bigger level of business I have, the next bigger project I do, then I'll be there, right? Yeah. And now I was there. And I was like, what the fuck do I do now? Because this is not what I thought it was going to be, right? I didn't have this. Yeah,
so
no, go
Robert,
ahead.
Can you articulate that feeling of having everything external to you as you desired, but feeling what I would imagine was still wanting something inside? Can you articulate what that felt like?
Well, it was a series of emotions because I was really confused about it. Because I had followed the recipe of society. I had followed what everybody tells you to do that makes you a successful man, a praiseworthy man. And I was disillusioned. I was confused because I said, if this is not it, then what is it? Like what? And then I was even more confused because now I live in this prestigious neighborhood, this gated community on the water in Miami, all these, hootie patooties like me, that think their shit doesn't stink. And, I go to these parties and like, I was lost. I was like, this is so devoid of like, there's no meaning to this. And then, I got really lost in that. Like, I don't know what else to do. This is all I know how to do. This is what I've been doing for 20 years. And the world keeps saying, oh, what are you going to do next? What project? So I was like, well, maybe I should just do more projects. Maybe I should just go back and like, not stop, right? And just keep running. And, I had a boutique investment firm at that time. And so I put my pitch deck together. I go back to investors and, the deck was fine. But I sit there and I couldn't sell anything anymore. Like it didn't interest me. And I would see 10 decks on the corner of their desk. And I'm like, man, we're all doing the same shit. We're just moving decimals around on a spreadsheet, like fundamentally, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, we are like the so-called the capital bankers of the world. And we think we're all so great, right? But we're moving decimals around on a spreadsheet. Like that is what we're doing, right? And we're clever about it. Mm-hmm. So we're extracting we're extracting a lot of excess profits because we're abusing power of knowledge, power of capital, power of influence. And so if you're on the right side of the fence on that game, that's a fun game. This is like playing cricket and you win 8 out of 10 matches all the time because you got all the power, you got all the leverage. But I was at this point, I was like, there was something inside of me was broken. I couldn't do it anymore. But at the time, I was really confused about it because I had no idea I had some sense of spirituality. My mother was an astrologist, so I had grown up with some of this, but it was really suppressed. And I really, in the beginning, I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what else to do. And then I just started reading, and I started kind of
What
delving
did you
into.
read? What books were
Well,
you reading back then?
I went to the obvious ones first, like, the Eckhart Tolles of the world and all that stuff. And that's beautiful stuff. But I was like, this is not deep enough. And so I got into Krishnamurti, Aristotle, and Plato, and, Stoicism. And, I really just went in a deep dive. And because I had access to money, I said, I'm going to dedicate myself to this. I'm going to figure this out, right? Like a typical alpha, like I'm going to conquer spirituality, right?
Sorry,
so I read Robert,
sorry, were you still working at the time then in the finance?
I had my own business, and I had kind of slowed it down to about 20% of the time commitment I had before. I still had a full service office. I would show up and do like an hour and a half of work, and the rest of the day I was just just doing other
just to
stuff.
get an insight into, you miss that
But
step?
but that was also holding up this facade, because I didn't know what to tell my wife at the time. Like, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, I know I'm really busy. I'm doing new deals. I'm like, I wasn't doing shit. I was like really lost, and I was like, I knew this, I now in hindsight, I know it was an awakening moment, right? At the moment, I didn't know what that was. But I found out pretty quickly, and then I started going down this path of learning and growing and reading and evolving, and and it was a process. It was a lot. It was because a lot of unraveling, a lot of conditioned thinking that needed to be let go. It was, and then I'm stuck in a world where my now ex-wife, and we have a beautiful relationship. She's a wonderful, beautiful woman, but she wasn't on this path. So I also had internally, like, there was no connection there. And so I was changing in her eyes. I wasn't the man anymore she married. And so, there's obviously that challenge going on, and you try to navigate that the best you can. And so it was a process. It wasn't pretty. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It was gnarly at times, right? She's just a confused man trying to hold up the pretense that everything is fine. But inside of me, I was wrecked, and I was confused, and I was searching. And I didn't really even know where or what to search for or what I was looking for, but I knew where I was, I couldn't go back to.
Yeah. Robert, there's a couple of things that I want to get into a bit deeper with you. First one is the values and expectations your father had on you when you were very young. I'd like to go into this. If you could describe growing up in that type of childhood, what it does to a young boy. And then after that, if you don't mind, we can get into the relationship with your ex-wife, as in when two people don't grow together. And then we can expand on that. But let's go back to
and when we go to that, ask me about world-class ex-husband, because I do have something very important to say for men, if I may. So my father, my father passed away in 2017. He was born in 1940, 2 months before the Germans invaded Holland. He lost his father when he was 3. And I say this because there's a story to why he became who he was, right? And so he grows up fatherless, essentially. His mother was a Montessori school teacher, so there wasn't a lot of money. And this is, really, he was 5 years old when the war is over. In the next 10 years to 1955, which is basically his whole childhood till 15 years old, Holland is rebuilding after the war, and it was devastating, right? So he grows up with a scarcity mindset. There's no one here to help you. There's no God. Everything is devastated. Millions of people lost their lives in Europe. Everything is like a mess. Everybody's trying to rebuild it. And, he went into the world and he said, I'm just going to go take care of myself. And he was a very smart man. He was very driven. He was very ambitious, put himself through university. He went into the army, actually. He went into the draft, was an officer in the army, went to university, and then had a rocket career. And at that time, actually Holland was doing great. 60s, 70s, 80s was very prosperous. Europe was blossoming again. The Marshall Plan had come through. And so, he had perfect timing and his career was great. He had a lot of abundance, but he was a miser, and he was, I have two older brothers, 8 and 5 years older. My older brother is a great guy, but was a little wild and a little unruly. And my middle brother really struggled in school and everything came easy to me. And so, good or bad or indifferent, I was really good in sport. My oldest brother was very good athlete as well. And so he called me the golden child. You're my hope. You're my golden child, which in a way flattered me, but in a way put all that like load on me, like, you have to do it. And then when I told him in my early teens or something, I really want to be a tennis pro, he says, that's not a career. What do you want to be, like a tennis teacher? That's not you can't do that. And I said, no, I want to be a pro. I want to win Wimbledon. He says, you're not going to win Wimbledon. Screw that. You can do that in after hours, academic, do your school. So he was a dream killer too, and then I want to be an architect. He didn't think that was really, they don't make any money, just become a businessman, or something like that. And so there was pressure there. And I wanted to, I was a little bit wild too, and rebellious. And I really wanted his love. I wanted his attention. I wanted him to tell me that he was proud of me. And so part of this, kind of career escalation that I had in my 20s that ran all the way to my early 40s, I had a chip on my shoulder because all I really wanted to hear is that he was proud of me. And he couldn't say it till his death. He never said it. Even though I eclipsed him in his career in some ways, he couldn't say it. And he was like, it was funny because I was at his memorial in Holland. I spoke at his memorial, and all these old family friends came together, and he says, oh my God, they're all come up to me and they're sorry about your father. And, he had Parkinson's for 12 years. So it was, merciful for him. And they all said, it must be so amazing. He always talked about you. He was always so proud of you. He was always following you. He was always bragging about all your stuff. And I was literally like, are you kidding me? Like, and that night, I remember this was 2017, like March 2017. I totally broke down because that's the only thing I ever wanted to hear from him. And he told the whole world but me.
Wow.
And I told my mom, I said, like, why couldn't he not tell me this? Why not once, And she said, and I my heart broke when she told me this. She said, listen, I was married to him for almost 50 years. And he told me he loved me once. This was a man that could not express his emotions. And so when she told me that, I was like, it had nothing to do with me. It had absolutely nothing to do with me. This was all with him. He couldn't express himself. Yes. Right? Yeah. And that was such a relief. I mean, it was an emotional scar I had to heal, but it was a big release. And then I could finally get to this place of, what? Now I can see it. And actually, what really helped was his older brother was there, who's now 90, just turned 90. And he was explaining to me their childhood and how they grew up. And like, the experience of Nazi soldiers in the house and stuff like that. And then I realized, like, he did the best he could and he did great. He always provided. And even though I went to Australia and I ventured off and I was this rebellious kid, I always knew that I was in real trouble. He'd always bail me out. Wow. I never called on it. Yeah. But I knew it, right? He would never let me, like, leave me behind or whatever like that. Yeah. And so, wow. It was a journey too. And but it was painful. And it's a lesson, like, okay, how can I do this different with my sons, right? What can I change? Yeah.
Okay. We'll get into that. But I've got, I just want to know that your dad is saying that he's very proud of you. So I just wanted to put that through. So
thank you. I
have to pass on the message when it comes. So
thank you. And I've since had mystical experiences and plant ceremonies, and I've we joke about I in this journey of life, this movie that we live, that we call life, you need an antagonist, right? And he
To
played
push
that
us.
role.
Yeah.
He played that role to perfection.
Yeah.
Because without that, I wouldn't have driven as hard as I did. I wouldn't have gone as dark as I did, right? And I wouldn't have met myself in those dark places. And our level of ascension is directly correlated to the level of descension we're willing and able to experience and transmute.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a gift. It was painful, but the biggest gifts in life are typically wrapped in sandpaper. And we forget that because we want it to be easy and convenient and go to Bloomingdale's with a big old bow around it. That's not how life works.
Mm-hmm.
Life, the biggest growth, your peaks in life are actually the calamities, catastrophes, and crises that you have, because that's where all your rupture is and your rising comes from.
Yes.
The gravy train stuff is easy. Enjoy it, have fun, laugh, but that's not where you really grow.
I love that. I love that insight, Robert. Would you say that you've forgiven your father?
Yeah.
Can you work through that process of forgiveness, both on an individual level and with your professional expertise? What does forgiveness do to a man?
Well,
and how does he get there?
I think there's a couple of things that I had to learn about forgiveness, because when I first thought about forgiveness, the way I'd grown up, and I didn't grow up particularly religious, but in a religious connotation, it's somehow God, waving his wand and something is forgiven, maybe through the priest, right? But that actually has nothing to do with the forgiveness we're talking about. Now, the first thing is forgiveness is for you, right? You forgive for you, so you can take the load out of your backpack. Right? That is the number one thing that I didn't really understand it until someone really set me down, and because I was like resistant. And I was like, they need to pay. They need to,
Yeah.
And they say, and he said, well, who's paying? And I said, what do you mean? He says, who's paying? Who's holding the suffering? I'm like, what do you mean? He says, look at yourself. Who's holding the suffering? And it just dawned on me like, oh my God, I got my fist like this, And then it's like, forgiveness. Is I can let it go.
Yes.
Now I don't have to carry it. And when that clicked for me, it was like, I do this for me primarily, right? Mm. And then when you can, everything is energy and everything is a boomerang. Let's talk about Australia. So, that boomerang that you can throw out is like revenge, retaliation, angry thoughts, negative energy. Guess what's going to boomerang right back? Now, if you have the heart and the courage and the strength and the spiritual fortitude to say, you know what, I'm going to break this. I'm going to break this cycle. I'm going to throw grace, love, compassion, understanding. And I'm not condoning it necessarily. I'm just saying, like, fuck, man, I'm human too. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. I've harmed people.
Yeah.
And, what comes around goes around. So this just had to, I just showed up in my life. So I own it, right? Responsibility for it, 100%. If it's in my life, it's mine. Because otherwise I have no power. Mm-hmm. And then from power, I can say, I can forgive because I can let it go. Now, if you really want to go to the mastery level of forgiveness, which is where this world is really struggling, like, can you look at Putin right now and forgive him? Can you look at the most egregious criminals, the most egregious people in this world, and already preemptively forgive them and say, you know what? They are operating from their small self. They are not connected at this moment with that spark of divinity within. They are disconnected from that. That is a hard incarnation to live through. I'm going to have compassion for them. No matter, I'm not condoning what they do. I'm just saying I'm not holding that aggression in me. I'm not holding that retaliation, that revenge. because it's not going to solve anything. We can only solve, every problem is created at a plane of existence, and it can only be solved at a higher plane of existence. There are no solutions at the same level that it's created. Einstein said this, and you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. Thinking is intelligence. The same level of intelligence that creates a problem cannot solve it. So whenever we want to solve a problem, we have to rise to another level of intelligence wherein we can dissolve the prior problem and situation. And that is in my control.
Yeah.
Because I can always rise. I can always take the high road. I can always elevate. Because that I control. I don't control the outside. I can't control what they do or what they did to me, how they respond to it. I can't control that. They might take my forgiveness and spin it around negatively. I can't control that. I can only be in my power and push out what I can control, right?
Yeah, that's so good. I'm wondering, Robert, if you believe in reincarnation, or you think it's random that you were born as the son of your father.
There's absolutely, let me tell you, from my experience, and everybody can have their own truth. We've all been here thousands of times, and there's not a single thing in this universe that is an accident, a fluke, a coincidence, or a random event. Not a single thing. Not a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis, not an insect on your car. There is nothing random. Now, we don't have the intelligence to comprehend all the intelligence that it takes, that it involves, right? I mean, we have just a very limited sliver of society, of reality. Now, Buckminster Fuller had a beautiful saying. He said, we see through our five senses and we experience about 1% of reality. We actually know from quantum physics, that's overstating it by about 10 times. It's about 0.1% of reality that we experience. The rest we don't experience. So if you imagine that, there's these hundreds of billions of variables at play at any given time, because this is a co-creative movie that, everybody's creating at the same time. And there's a lot of things, all instantly, right? All in this moment. And you are only really seeing maybe 1% of it, perceiving 1% of it. So 99%, you don't know what's happening. But I can guarantee you it's not random. Because if you know sacred geometry, you know numbers, you know all these things. I mean, it is mathematical, right? And this is a poetry that is so profound, and it is so amazing. And we're part of it. Yeah. We're one spark of divinity expressing itself, experiencing itself, in this reality we call Earth. It's absolutely mesmerizing. We're spiritual.
You are speaking my language. I love it.
And my new book, I wrote a second book that's coming out hopefully in January. I really go into all these things, but where I end up is like, you're a poet, but you have to decide to be a poet and make your life spiritual art. You are here to create art. You are an art project. You are like Michelangelo with the David statue, but you're both the sculptor and the sculpture. You are here to create art, the most refined art you can create out of yourself in your expression into life, right?
Love it.
What's more beautiful than that? We're all poets.
I love that. Thank you. I wanted to touch on that reincarnation piece, because for me on my journey, that was a vital piece to understanding the meaning of life and why we're here. And from there came forgiveness, acceptance, just for the journey. And it's it just put everything together and just made everything so much easier to let go and just, take it for what it was. So thanks for sharing that. Let's get into
let me add one. Yeah, let me add one thing to that, because for men, this might, because we always like, no, we need to get even. But listen, there is such a thing as karmic responsibility. You will never, ever escape anything you've ever done, said, created, or thought. You will not escape it. And so you don't have to worry about getting equal or getting even or revenge or anything, because those things that are not, rectified by the, our human justice systems or laws or things like that, right? Those are karmic debts that are going to have to be repaid. So you don't have to worry about it. That's not your job to worry about these things. Just let that go and just trust that the universe will take care of that, and they'll have to see the other side of if they were an offender in one case, they're going to have to be the offended maybe at some point and experience it from the other side. So they'll come 360 on everything. Now, this karmic responsibility is also a reason to think about purification in your own life, not from a perspective of like, I need to go to heaven or otherwise I go to hell. It's more like, why have debts? Why not try to have the least amount of debts in your life to the universe? Because it's possible. You don't have to accumulate these debts. You have a choice. You have free will.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that. And that's something I've come to understand too, that the quantum universe will take care of anything that you feel as an injustice to you. But at the end of the day, as you spoke about your father, what we would perceive to be an injustice is often our greatest teacher that we've invited into our experience for our own growth.
100%.
Okay. Yeah, would you like to talk about your relationship with your ex-wife and what happens to a man when you feel that you're not growing at the same rate as your partner?
Yeah, so we had the fairy tale romance and wedding, and we were both career people, and we have 3 amazing kids, beautiful kids. When I started going into this process, I was really changing, and I was really starting to look at the world very differently and experiencing it differently. And it was hard for us to connect because she was losing her husband that she knew. The guy that was just a go-getter, and and she was happy with that life. That was a good life to her. It was like, she had a successful husband, she had beautiful kids, materially there were no worries. It was very comfortable, and in her sense, that was her dream life that she had chosen. And here I am, like, kind of rolling off the tracks the way she would perceive it, right? And so, someone that's more on the spiritually oriented would say, no, fantastic, you rolled off the tracks and you went right into your awakening, initiation, rite of passage, walk through the fire, phoenix rising. You're the, like, it's all just perspective. But to her, her whole life came apart because her husband became strange, and he was more interested in these esoteric topics and even occultism to her, right? And this was strange and airy-fairy stuff, and and so it was more difficult to connect. And going through a transformative period like this is kind of chaotic as it is, and then try to hold a marriage together and all that was difficult, and it just proved very difficult. And eventually, a decision had to be made, and she was never going to make that decision because materially it was still very comfortable. And she had a Catholic background where divorce is very frowned upon. She was very afraid. She was more afraid to tell her parents than that the marriage was dead. It tells you something, no? She wanted to hold the story together. One of my, literally, she's, and I don't blame her. I mean, she was like, this is where she was emotionally. Like, what am I going to tell my friends? What am I going to tell my parents? What am I going to tell my family? I can't go home and tell them I'm divorced or getting divorced. It's so it was shattering her world. Yes. And, finally I made that decision. I saw that it was better for both of us. And I have to give her so much kudos because she might not be on this path, but she has an enormous heart. And that's why I fell in love with her in the first place. I mean, she's a beautiful person, and she's a heart-centered person in her own way. She's a badass mom. And she's just a really good person. She's just not really consciously awake or interested in really developing, cultivating that aspect of herself. And so when we went into the separation and divorce, she had no clue what we had financially. She was like, I just, it was all taken care of. So we sat down and we decided, we set some rules, and we said, like, the kids first, ego second. And so everything we're going to do is going to be in the best interest of the kids. And we agreed on that. And I said, rather than fight and waste a lot of money on lawyers and all this stuff, why don't we hire a family counselor and a mediator, and we'll try to do it amicably. And we literally had a pretty rich estate to fight over, but we didn't fight. And we spent $6,000 in 4 hours on lawyers, and we figured it out.
Wow. Yeah.
And, she will tell you today that this was a profound growth opportunity for her as well, because she was very much, I don't want to like the word submissive wife, but she was very much like, in my slipstream, I was this overpowering alpha guy that was just like in the lead, and she followed me, and I provided well, but, this forced her to rise in her own way, to become her own woman. She found new love, which is beautiful. And it's a great guy, by the way, nice guy, 180-degree different from me. So it's, clearly also for her, that was a better fit. And we have an amazing co-parenting relationship we've been able to put together, and we vacation together. We do all the holidays together. I help her out quite a bit during the week because she has, kind of a part-time career that she does, and I have some availability most of the time. So it's evolved into something really beautiful. And what I wanted to leave for guys, and this was something that someone told me, a good friend of mine, before I was going, I was about to go for the divorce. And, I wasn't a great husband, right? I had cheated on her. I had, girlfriends and other lives in Bogota. I lived like the bullshit banker life, So a lot of the blame was with me. I was the one that broke his vows. I was the one that violated the wedding vows, the marriage, the honor and all that. And, this friend of mine said, you need to own up to her and own up to the situation. And he says, what I expect, if you're going to go through with this, what I expect from you as a man is you screwed up this husband thing, and that's fine, but own it. And you commit to her that you're going to be a world-class ex-husband. And anything less, I would be so disappointed in you. And this was a very dear friend. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, fuck, you're right. Because I can still own that. And so the moment we got divorced, I told her name is Kara. I said, Kara, I fucked this up. I changed. This was more me than it was you, right? But it's always two, but it's more me. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to be a world-class ex-husband. You're going to rave about me. And not because I want to get the praise, but because you deserve that. Because I also harmed you and I hurt you. And so, we've had that intention, and I still have that intention. And, she chuckles about it, but I think I've owned up pretty well to it. And I would say, as a man, if you find yourself in this situation, this is one of the most beautiful growth opportunities you can find. Because it's easy to go to the next relationship and try to be all dapper and noble there. And it's all great to, funnel all this newfound singlehood, energy into your career, and maybe even make your business more successful and all that stuff. But this is a way to really forge that metal.
Yeah.
Right? That heart, that compassion. Because she's the mother of your children. If you have children with her, she gave you life.
Yeah.
Right? And you might not want to be married, and maybe that's in their best interest not to be married, but you can still honor the fact that she gave you 3 kids, that she, this is beautiful. And she, the feminine, is creation.
Yes.
And everything that's feminine is Mother Earth, but also a business, a boat, it's not the material part of it, but everything of creation of life, right, is feminine in nature.
Yes.
And so to me, it was a way to forge this metal, because you can talk all day long about spirituality and have pretty stories. But spirituality is how you do the dishes. It's not the fancy words you use. It's how you show up in life and how you act, right?
Okay.
And so I saw it as an opportunity to really, like, step up to the plate and say, okay, now I got to bring this into the world and really live it. Not just talk pretty shit.
Yeah,
like,
because you were
live
already
it.
doing the theory, so it gave you an opportunity to start embodying it. Yeah, I always
Yeah.
say the theory is 10% and the actual embodiment, the journey, is the other 90.
Yeah.
Robert, I'm going to pick your mind about what's going through a man's mind when he decides to cheat on his partner. And I know it's there's probably variations, but
yeah.
I'd like women to be able to understand
Yeah.
this.
Well, let me be careful and just speak from my experience, right? And let me start by saying that when a man is like, really happy and the relationship is going really well and things are just flowing and thriving, I doubt he would have any eyes for anybody else, right? So there's always something kind of missing, but there could also be something missing inside of him. And I can just relate it to myself. All of the things I did, which that was just one of those expressions of, disintegrity, right? Dishonesty, not being noble, but I did it in business and other areas of my life. It always comes back to low self-worth. Because for me, a business deal, making more money, another woman, was a pursuit. It was something to conquer. It was an exercise of power. It was like, I'm still relevant. I'm still a player, so what I was seeking is validation. I could care less about the sex, because honestly, as we all know, after a few experiences, it's all the same. I mean, the buffet doesn't change, right? I mean, so it wasn't about the next experience that was so different than the previous one. That's when you're a teenage boy and, or teenage girl, and you experience a little bit. And at some point, you've kind of like, you kind of been around the buffet. So you know what it all looks and feels like, right?
Yeah.
So then it's about, well, what are you seeking? And I think for men, a lot of times it's self-worth, a low self-worth. He's seeking validation through conquering a woman.
Right.
And, you cannot truly be in integrity and in control of your testosterone if it's not rooted in self-love.
Yeah.
If you cannot look yourself in the mirror and respect the man you see, you will have a hell of a hard time being in integrity in all situations, being courageous when you need to, having spiritual fortitude, having nobility, having a gentleness, a compassion, a love for others, including her. And I'm, I know there's a lot of coaching around the stuff, and I'm not as restrictive as, I think everybody needs to figure this out for themselves, what works best for them, what's most evolutionary for their process. But I do believe this, as a man, once you start being in integrity, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot break hearts. And if you know that you are engaging with a woman that has different expectations or different hopes or different dreams than what you are doing, then you should be a man and control your testosterone and honor her and honor her heart, because we cause way too much damage that way.
Yeah.
By being cavalier with her heart.
Yeah. Robert, what would you say to men who are in that situation where, they're seeking external fulfillment in women outside their partnership, but they're starting to realize they're not acting in the best integrities or aligning with the heart energies? steps, what solid steps can they take to start unraveling this situation?
Yeah, you got all these easy questions, all these little layups. I have to get back to the one thing. I mean, I have this practice that I enacted. I look myself in the mirror every night, and I have a standard for myself. I want to be able to respect myself, because I for the longest time I couldn't. And so I found myself, smoking weed, drugs, painkillers, sleeping pills. I was partying, calling it entertain clients, but I was numbing myself, right? So get out of the numbing and start owning the guy you see in the mirror every night. And then in addition to that, start waking up and looking that same guy in the mirror and give him instructions for the day. Set the bar. What are you going to hold yourself to? Because if you cannot lead yourself as a man, you have no hope of leading anything in this world. If you cannot penetrate your own heart, right, you cannot penetrate this world. And that includes whichever woman happens to be your love. But penetration is also in the business world, in other endeavors, in friendships, because there's the masculine energy. It's about penetration. Now, penetration comes from presence, right? And presence actually is a derivative of integrating the feminine and the masculine, because you got to open up that goddamn heart. You got to get out of your mind and open up the heart. Now, you can go back to ancient mystery schools in Egypt and resurrection principles under the Knight Templar. Everything is about unity between the masculine and the feminine inside. And so the irony is that as you integrate the feminine within as a man, you become more masculine. It's very paradoxical, because people are like, well, I don't want to become airy-fairy. Trust me, you don't become airy-fairy, but you become in touch with that other intelligence that's within you, that other wisdom, those other qualities, the intuitive, the flowing, the compassion, the love, and that integrated with your masculine will actually make you that much more potent as a man in this world. And you'll have so many more tools that you can avail yourself to, because sometimes you need to be really in your masculine and logical and action oriented. And sometimes you need to be flowing with life, like a bamboo, just kind of flowing in the wind, because otherwise you break. And, you become so much more gifted in communicating with her, because she doesn't,
Sorry, Robert. What would you say to a man who, this is the first time hearing that, he's got masculine and feminine energies. And so he's like, well, how do I start connecting to my feminine energies? And how do I know what's feminine and what's masculine?
Yeah. Well, the challenge for men is that they're not really in their body. Right. And women naturally are in their body. And this is something that happens organically, because when young girls start to menstruate, they start to be in cycles. And so they are naturally kind of lodged into the cycles of her body. And so women are much more connected hormonally with their body, because they have wild swings, and they ride these waves, and they dance a lot more with their body. Men are very much in their head, in Western society especially. Yeah. So, and just going out and working out, you can still be in your head, even though you're pumping weights. So it's about consciously feeling your body, slowing down, like feeling, intuiting, and learning the language of the heart. Now, the language of the heart is quite easy. It's feeling, sensing, intuiting, and direct knowing. That's the language of the heart, right? Now, the heart, that's the portal, that's feminine intelligence that will open up. So you have to learn this language, that talks in whispers, where the logical mind is very loud. So you have to quiet down the mind. You can do that again by slowing down, by being in silence, by listening to solfeggio tuning. Maybe go have a music bath or a sound bath with sound tuning. Just sit in stillness. You don't even have to meditate, just sit in stillness, right? Just breathe, just follow your breath. But you have to get into the body first to have any kind of inkling of, getting to this feminine energy or the feminine intelligence that's within you. Now, the second part that I would recommend is do something that is completely outside your typical logical orientation. And this is like play music, art, go gardening, something that takes you out of your logical mind and just makes you one with whatever you're doing. You could go on a hike, but don't take a map. Like just get lost. Now that's dangerous in Australia because there's a lot of wildlife that you don't want to get lost to. But what I'm saying is like, do things without a plan. Do things like without the logical mind. And the Aboriginals actually is one of the very original people that are still very in tune with the dream world. Because there's a whole sensory world that we have access to. That information is available to us. And, if you could be imagining it like Aboriginals, for instance, like if you asked them, how do you know the direction? She said, I just follow the energy. I just listen. Listen to what? There's no map. There's no nothing. How do you know where to go? Oh, my ancestors are talking to me, right?
Yeah.
Totally connected.
Yeah. So
huge amount of feminine intelligence that they avail themselves to that, we have lost here in Western society. And so I would say go towards those things that, can kind of awaken that.
That's great.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. But with you bringing up the Australian Aborigines, I was just seeing if you were aware of this rock formation behind me.
Yeah.
No, it's actually close to. It's because my head, but it has got.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, I see the dips now. Yeah, but I thought it was.
It's Katajuda, which is the sacred masculine site. So it's about 40-minute drive from Uru. But that's what this one is in Central Australia. So yeah, the masculine energy coming through.
But we lost a lot of this, right? And what I would say is like cut yourself off all numbing for a month. Like start there. No alcohol, no cigarettes. Try to limit your caffeine. No porn, no weed or any of those other things you're doing. All your painkillers, all your anesthesia. Take it away. Because I need you to feel life. And I need you to start watching a documentary and cry your eyes out because the hardship that you see, like look at a documentary and see some of the suffering in this world. And I say this as a teaching exercise because you got to crack that heart open. Because the way we view these things, we just flip through it like, it's nothing. And then we go back to our regular life and it means nothing. But, watch it, internalize it as a human being. What does that mean, right? Try to feel, try to sense. Like we got to activate that part in us to become alive again, truly, because most men are just robots.
Yeah, Robert, I'd like to get into about smoking weed. A lot of people, especially in the spiritual awareness community, say it's a plant medicine and they use it a lot. And they say that because it's natural, it's fine. It's part of the journey. But you're saying it numbs you and stops allowing you to feel. Can you speak into that, please?
Well, and listen, I'm not here to say everybody needs to become a monk. There's a place and time for everything. Even tobacco can be used. Organic tobacco can be used. It's used in plant ceremonies. Ayahuasca is pure nature too, is organic, but you don't use that every day, right? There's lots of organic medicines in nature that you do not use every day. Yeah. You don't use anesthesia every day. And when we're talking about men, and trying to connect to the feminine, which I need you to feel. I need you to get into your body. I need you to feel your own pain. I need you to be, and I was there. and it's not fun, but I need you to be in the fetus position on your bed and crying your eyes out as a grown man and just be completely ravished by life and feel all of it. Because now you're coming alive. Now the life force is coming through you. Now you're like, yeah, and that part of it sucks, but there's poetry in that too. Because it's so beautiful when you allow that to happen. Because behind that feeling is going to be your salvation. It's your liberation is behind that pain. But unless you allow that pain to rise so you can work through it, right? It's just going to be suppressed. And so I'm not against someone using, a little bit of weed here or there. Or I'm not here to say anybody needs to do anything. But if we're talking about a man that wants to connect and wants to activate this stuff, then I need you to feel everything. I need to feel every pain, every anguish. I need you to feel all of it, because now we can go to work.
Exactly. Do you agree with it's only when you're in so much emotional discomfort and emotional pain that you're actually motivated to make the changes that you need to rise above it? But if you keep numbing it, it's you're never going to explore that depth and actually overcome it. Would you agree with that?
They're all just experiences, and they're all just messages, right? There's wisdom. Like, pain for the sake of pain and suffering is just suffering. Pain that we extract the medicine from, right? We de-venomize it and we alchemize it into wisdom. Yeah. Now it's the most beautiful thing in the world. Yeah. Right? But we have to feel. And the biggest challenge I think we have with men today in the world is they don't feel. So we can have all these wars and violence and hate and racism and crazy politics, and people are saying things that you're like, how on earth could you say that? We're talking about people. We're talking about sacred human beings that they're all a spark of divinity. They're just like you and me. And how could you even contemplate uttering those words? You can, because you're in your head. You're lost in the cobwebs of your mind. If you truly felt and you truly see everybody, and you have a notion of the sanctity of life and the sacredness of every single person, right? Every single being, every aspect of creation, that beautiful rock there, once you start feeling that, now your intelligence will be lifted, your consciousness will be lifted to a different level, and all of reality will look different. You will come up with different solutions, different answers, and they will be self-evident. And they do not exist at a lower plane of existence. They are out of sight. But you have to feel first, and for men especially in Western society, we don't feel, we suppress.
Yeah. Robert, from your experience, and individual and professional, what other tools can you give to men who are in the interim of knowing there's something more out there, but not quite sure what it is, how to explore it, and how to unravel their lives and trust the flow that's being presented in front of them?
Right. I think what's really powerful for men, there's some really powerful kind of brotherhood groups, some really profound leaders. A good friend of mine is called Trevor Bone. He runs Uncivilized Nation. I'm not advocating it, but that's one of those groups. But there's numerous of them, right? I don't particularly run one of those, but I think brotherhood, finding men that are on this journey with you, right? That you can find a tremendous amount of support, especially if you are married or in a relationship and all that, because it's not advisable to lay all that with her. I'm not saying to close down to her, but there are some things we got to solve ourselves, or at least really lead ourselves, right? And she, however magical she is, she cannot lead you to, you have to lead yourself.
Yeah.
As a
So
man.
are you saying that men need to talk to other men and not women about this journey to become?
I'm not saying, I'm saying if you fully draw your, if it's a love relationship, if you fully draw her into this and your chaos, right? That's not really good for her system. That's not going to be very helpful. That is not to say that you cannot very clearly communicate, and that you can say, like, you can say, babe, I'm wrestling with something and it's big and it's chaotic, but I got it. And it's got nothing to do with you. But you have to give me some space as I work my way through this. And it has nothing to do with you. And you remind her all the fucking time that it has nothing to do with her, right? Because that's the most important thing she needs to know.
Yeah.
And then you seek the brothers, you seek a coach, you seek help. It could be a therapist, could be whatever. I mean, you go to a plant ceremony. I mean, whatever way you feel called, and you just go on this journey and go find the answers. And the puzzle in the journey is part of the trajectory, because this is something that you have to discover for yourself. You have to go inside. You have to go find out what this means to you, and where your wounds and scars are. And then, carefully, and sometimes it's very helpful to work with people that have gone there before, so they can kind of help you through this process and kind of unpack, these wounds and sore spots, and kind of coach you through it. Sometimes it can be a book, sometimes it can be a documentary, sometimes a workshop or a retreat. But I am a big believer that I think if you can find a brotherhood of like-minded men that have created a sacred circle where this can be shared, where there's an opportunity to go through this, and you can pour your heart out. And there's lots of exercises to do. All these groups are constituted a little bit differently. It depends on who's organizing them and who's bringing them forward. But I think that's a beautiful way to do it, in a very powerful way. But most importantly, I think you have to look yourself in the mirror again, and not just respect yourself, but remind yourself, I got this. No matter how fucking messy it is, I got this. Yeah. I got myself. And it might not look pretty. And you don't look in the kitchen when the sausage is being made. But I am not the first one to go through this. Yeah. There's legions of men and women that have gone through this process before me. Yeah. There's legions of people that came out and rose to higher places, and I'm going to figure it out. And I know this one, I got to do the path. I got to walk the fire. I know I have to walk the fire. Yes. There's no way around it. Oh. Because as long as I'm looking for excuses, you're not walking the fire yet. And so you have to tell yourself, okay, I'm willing to strip naked before the Almighty and just show me where to go. Lead me forward.
Yes. Robert, we're going to start winding up now, but there's a topic I'd like to discuss first, and then later on you can share your links and books and how people can find you. But I'd like to get your perspective on, first of all, well, either way, but divine masculinity, healthy masculinity, and wounded masculinity. Some of the traits, the characteristics, so men can understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, and those terms have gotten so messed up. I personally like to use sovereign masculine for no other reason than that there's a lot of kind of misplaced.
I like that too. Yeah.
Because really, this is what it's all about, and this is not that much different for women, although they go through a slightly different. It's a slightly different process for them, but it really mirrors it. Sovereignty really means you become your own person, right? But most of all, you recognize that you are a spark of divinity. You are an individuated expression of God, creator, monad, infinite intelligence. I don't care what label you use, it doesn't matter, but you are divinity incarnated into this expression. And you are sovereign for that reason, which means that you can cultivate sovereign critical thought, which means that the truth for you becomes something that you don't just adopt from the next person or someone that something you saw on TV or documentary or whatever book you're reading. You're actually thinking for yourself, what is true for me, right? And within that, we start cultivating this autonomy where we're really just an expression of that divinity. And within that, we can love ourselves and we can say, I'm not perfect, but I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to work on my imperfections. If I was perfect, I didn't have to be here, right? So I'm just here to work on my imperfections, and I own all of them, and I'm working on them. And the more I find, the more work I have to do. And it's beautiful, right? Because it's never ending. This is an eternal game. So, we're shifting the game we're playing from what I call finite games in material world to the infinite game, which is played for eternity. It's like, how beautiful can we make our expression? How pure can I be? How elevated can I be? Well, once you start thinking about those things, you start thinking about integrity, responsibility, love, compassion, harmony with life, not causing any harm. You're thinking about creating beauty in this world, having reference for this world for other people. Like these become just natural outgrowth. You start thinking about your health because I got this vessel, I got to take care of this because if I want to carry a higher energy, a higher frequency, which comes with higher consciousness, this body needs to be able to carry it. So now you're naturally, organically interested in, I'm going to take care of this vessel. It doesn't mean you need to be like a six-pack, Photoshop model. It just means you take care of your health, right? Because this is a vessel that carries your energy. It carries your life force. And so, you want to be able to carry it at higher energy. And I think for a man, once he kind of starts setting his sights on that as his primary goal in life, right? And then the games in the finite world, the business and all that stuff, that's just fun. That's practice grounds. That's where we practice all this stuff. Because integrity means nothing if you talk about it, but you can't do it in business. It means nothing if you talk about it, but you don't do it in your relationship. It means nothing, right, if you don't do it when you're in public transportation, right, and you have a free pass, and so you don't pay for a ticket. That's integrity too. It's the smallest little things.
Yeah. And
so you start thinking about, well, I'm going to hold myself accountable. I don't need rules and laws. The only reason we need rules and laws in this world is because we don't hold ourselves accountable.
Yes. Yeah.
But at a higher level, a higher plane of existence, which is available to us as humanity, as we rise in consciousness, we don't need all these politicians coming up with all this crazy shit, right? Because we can take care of ourselves. We're responsible.
Yeah.
We're like, and again, it's not that we become monks, but we just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do for me. Because if I don't do it, how can I expect anybody else to do it?
And what does that feel like, Robert, when now you look at yourself in the mirror and you're a man of integrity? What can you articulate how you're feeling, the emotions?
I don't know. I mean, you're a woman. You see me like, you experience me. It's hard to tell that by yourself. But I tell you something. I was reading something really profound this weekend. It was a book about Love to No End. It's a book about Jesus. Someone channeled Jesus. And there was a beautiful exchange in that, right? And I come from this old business world economic mindset of just extraction, exploitation, and leveraging all your competitive advantages and all that stuff. And so I'm having a guy doing something on Fiverr. That's one of those freelance sites, right? and he's creating a new font for me that I want him to create. And he's working on it, and we had a little bit of miscommunication. It was not a lot of money. And he came back, and this guy has a perfect 5 rating, and he keeps coming back, and he says, you know, I don't want you to give me a bad rating, and you're so patient with me. I said, it's not about patience. It's just like we're working together, right? I picked you, you picked me, like we're working together. And this is not about a lot of money. And then he said, you know, I just want you to know I'm going to get this right. And I sent him back, and I said, Aman, I want you to know that you need to tell me if you need a little bit more money because it's taking you more time. Because I don't want to abuse your time just because I can. And I especially don't want to do it over $10 or $20, which means next to nothing for me and might mean the world to you. And so I'm being in my integrity, I feel, because I want it to be fair both ways. And it's a completely way to live life because it's fun this way. Because I don't feel bad at all sending him a comment and asking for another revision. And because I know I'm going to do the right thing. And, you know, how often do we go and you know, we go to a garage sale or this or that, and we get something way too cheap and we don't say anything. Well, what if we just said, like, you know, are you sure about this? Like, you know, this might be worth a lot more. Maybe you didn't charge me the right amount, or, you know, and it's just one example of integrity. Now, in my personal relationship, you know, I'll give you a funny story. So when I was in my heyday, I had this lunch. I was a big, you know, fancy suit wearing guy. I had a lunch, bunch of heavy duty insurance guys. And one of them was bragging that he had 2 phones. One was his play phone and one was his work phone. And they were identical. And he was explaining, he says, you know, this way, if I get confused, you know, it was actually his ex-wife that was the CFO, but he's going for divorce or whatever. He says, you know, then she doesn't know which one it is and all that. And I was like, at that time, I was like, fucking brilliant. I called my Bogota secretary. I said, I need another one of these iPhones, and like, it needs to be identical and all this shit. So I lived with 2 phones for like 2 years. You know how miserable that is? To live in lies, to live in deceit, to like, you know, and then you suppress it with alcohol and partying, and you put it away. And now I'm in so much integrity. You know, when I met my girlfriend, and then my private relationship too, I gave him the code to my phone. I only have one phone. I gave him the code to my phone, like on the second date. I said, you know, here's the code of my phone. Because I get a lot of messages. You're on social media, you know, that's just what happens. He said, why do you do this? He says, I have 0 secrets in my life.
Yeah.
And I am free. I am free. And anybody can read any email, any text, anything, anywhere. I don't care. I got nothing to hide. 0. That is freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
No bullshit, no lies. Now, in a relationship, you have to create, and obviously you have to have the right partner with that. But when I met my current girlfriend, I very early on, I said, listen, the only way that this could work for me, or you know, I wanted to be 100% raw. Like, we speak our truth 100%, even when we're shy, even when we don't, you know, I don't want to have one single non-truth in my life. I don't care what it is. I want you to feel free to tell me, and I'm going to do the same thing. And we're going to be raw, but live in 100% truth. No bullshit. Is the most liberating thing you can do.
I love that, because I live the same way. And I actually wrote a post a few days ago about that, and just described it exactly as that freedom, because you can see, you're transparent and you've got nothing to hide. So no fears, but you've got to work on that stuff so you can be that way. Yeah.
Well, you work on it, but you get, honestly, you get sort of addicted to it.
Yeah,
you
because
know, and that, like, I don't want any bullshit in my life. I don't want to, I have a no asshole rule in business. I don't do any business with people I don't like, because I don't want the hassle. I don't, you know, and it's like, now, obviously, sometimes you have counterparties you have to deal with, but generally speaking, like, you know, energy hygiene is a big thing. So for men starting on this path, either people are lifting you up, helping you rise, and helping you get ahead in life, cheering you on, maybe once in a while with constructive criticism, because that's needed, especially when you're a man, because you're a stubborn motherfucker like we all are. Sometimes you just need to be slapped across the face a few times and just say, listen, you need to listen right now, right? Men are stubborn. We're stubborn pricks sometimes. Or people are dragging you down. Now, when you go on this path to walk through the fire, start with energy hygiene. Like you're either on my team or you're not on my team. And that's totally okay. I love you away from my team too. But I'm just not going to be able to keep you in my inner circle, because I'm going to surround myself with those people that have the best interest for me, that and not that they're like at this moment, it's not opportunistic, because it's a collaboration. It's like I'm going to surround myself with people and we're going to all lift each other up, and we're all going to work on each other, and we're all going to hold each other accountable, and we're all going to catch the one that's kind of fallen down or going through a tough thing, right? And so this energy hygiene, I think, is a really, really important thing. And then on social media, I would say limit that to the greatest extent, even though you and I post, of course, beautiful stuff, but like, don't get involved in that armpit of energy vortex that is circling around social media that is not generally too uplifting. And go find your circles, go find real connections, real people, people you can touch, people you can call. I mean, pick up the goddamn phone, stop texting too, you know, like, and then if you can meet them in person, do that other than a phone call. I mean, call them to say, I want to meet you. I want to sit next to you. Sit in silence on the beach with your mate. Just sit next to him and just sit there for 10 minutes and then ask him. I said, so drop the bullshit. What's really going on with you? Right? Ask your dear friend. Like, tell me, drop all the bullshit. I don't want to hear the bullshit. What keeps you up at night? Tell me.
Love that. Robert, we're going to have to wrap up, even though I know we could talk for so much longer.
I'm sure.
It's been an incredible journey with you, and we've unpacked so much. Thank you. Before we go, I know you've got a couple of books and you've got some services to offer, so please take this time now to share where people can find you.
Thank you. I have a book called Never Enough Itis. I don't know if you can see it yet. Never Enough Itis. That's kind of my journey. It's 2 parts, kind of the journey I went through, including everything falling apart. And then the last chapter is actually, the last part is kind of some of the tools and some of the wisdom I gained in finding my way out of the valley, so to speak. That's available on Amazon. There's an audio version of it as well, if that's preferred for some people. I have a second book that I just wrote. It's at my publisher right now. It's probably going to be published in January, February. We're going to go for editing now. I'm really, really excited about that. That's a spiritual teaching framework anchored into the sacred geometry, flower life, Metatron's cube, and I go really deep into all those aspects of creation. And that was a 100% channeled book. So I channeled that, which was a really special kind of mystical experience. I'm very humbled by it. And I think some new teaching and offerings will flow from that, but that will be in the months ahead. On my website, there's a
what's that book called? Your new book? What's that?
I can't share that yet because it's not published.
Okay, all right. Sorry to interrupt.
But I can tell you the subtitle is The Ethos of Making Your Life Spiritual Art. That's the subtitle. I can't tell you the main title yet. Okay. My publisher hasn't released that yet. Now, on my website, you can sign up. There's something called The Hero's Journey, which is a 50-page ebook. It's free. You get on my list. I do send out some information once in a while, but that 50-page ebook, The Hero's Journey, is all about the awakening process. And it's a free ebook. Download it, read it. It's a quick read, but it will give you a lot of kind of a feel for this process and what it really entails. And you know, most of my work revolves around working with men and leaders and entrepreneurs that are finding themselves on this path of awakening. I also do some regenerative capitalism advisory work with businesses that is really transforming businesses that are awakening, basically, and guiding them towards regenerative principles, which are really the principles of nature, and how we translate that into the economics of a business and how a business operates and functions. And so that's what the advisory work I do on the business side. And then, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. And if anybody wants to reach out, please do. I'd love to hear from people. And if there's other offerings or other people that questions that anybody has, I'm happy to answer them. And a lot of time I refer people if I feel there's another coach or another mentor, another group that might be more suitable. And the last thing I want to say, my second book, I'm going to really break all the business rules. I'm actually going to make it for sale, but I'm also going to make a free copy available on my website. I haven't figured out yet technology-wise how I'm going to do that, but this is something that came to me from a higher source, and I'm going to honor that. This is really I'm just a typist. I'm just the vessel that has been chosen, but I'm going to honor that this wisdom is universal wisdom. And so for those that cannot afford a book, a $20 book, I'm going to find a way to make that available, which is kind of my way of cracking the code on this new world that we're entering, which is going to be much more around collaboration, cooperation, forming commons, and fair trade, but in a much broader concept of that, instead of just extracting, exploiting from others. So I'm excited to kind of start figuring that out and how to do that, and still pay my bills, of course, as well. So, we all have still the realities of life as well.
Oh, amazing, Robert. And thank you for being a leader, building our new earth with these core values of integrity and service to others while honoring yourself. That's such a fascinating journey to see how far you've come. And now, would you say you've found your joy, your happiness, your peace?
Yeah, and I will also say it's never done, because I'm finding this journey. Once we, Joseph Campbell called this the pathless land, and this is an eternal game. This isn't a one lifetime game, and so. The moment you think you got it all figured out, there's more layers to peel back. And I will say you become more masterful at doing this in more graceful ways, because the more tools you have, the more wisdom and knowledge, the more you kind of know the process of what's happening, the more graceful you can kind of guide yourself through it.
Yeah.
But it never stops. So I have reached great heights, but I think that there's an infinite amount of headroom ahead. And I think there's for everybody. I think there's, my biggest thing I try to convey to people in these times, which seem so disruptive and so chaotic, is that if you have a fundamental understanding of the transformative nature, that is the transformative capacity, the alchemizing capacity of this universe, then you don't have to worry watching what you see on TV, because we can radically solve this at a higher level of consciousness, like almost like by a snap of the fingers. And I'm not a woo-woo guy. I'm a Columbia Business School, Ivy League educated, economics guy.
Yeah. And
we can change it like that. It's just raising the consciousness. So if anything, we're in a race to raise human consciousness, because at higher levels of consciousness, entirely new solutions become available to us. And so there's nothing but hope. There's nothing but optimism. We just have to raise the consciousness. That's all we need to do. And a whole new world kind of emerges that is just out of sight right now for most of us. But I think some of us, maybe the pioneers, or you want to call them, kind of already energetically see it. And I'm not saying that makes us better. I'm just saying, like, there, I can tell you, it is absolutely mesmerizing. It's not guaranteed because we have to raise our consciousness.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. That's a great point to end on, Robert. So thank you again. I'll end the recording now. And if you could please send me through those links, so when I upload onto YouTube, I can add them all and people can find you. And thanks again for offering what you do for free, because obviously that's a beautiful gift to men and humanity. So thank you, Robert. And
thank you, Gemma. I really appreciate it.
And goodbye to everyone. I'll be back in a few days with another episode of Heart Warriors.
Thank you.
I'll just pause. You can stay on if you want.